How you doing today, guys? Today I'm going to be sharpening the chain on my Steel 066 chainsaw, and I figure I'll bring you guys along for the ride. But before we actually start sharpening, I just want to talk to you a little bit about sharpening theory. And in my book, there are 3 different ways to sharpen a chainsaw. The first way you sharpen a chainsaw is if it's a brand new chain, maybe you've gone through a few tanks of gas and it needs to be sharpened. If you're a hand filer, I notice when you're filing a new chain, because it's usually machine ground, it doesn't have the hook on it, quite often the file gets pretty grabby on the first few strokes when you're sharpening a new chain. And then the other thing I recommend you do if you have a new chain is go ahead and check your depth gauges. Even though it's a new chain, sometimes they can be off. So that would be the first way to sharpen a chain. The other way you sharpen a chain is what I call a maintenance sharpening, where you're out cutting, your depth gauges are good, but it's been 1 to 3 tanks of gas, you lost your edge and you just want to touch it up. And in my book, that's 2 to 3 strokes with a file, you're back at it. A few minutes, no big deal. And then the final time to sharpen a chain is if you've been doing a few maintenance sharpenings, maybe 3 or 4 maintenance sharpenings, and maybe you're not as good at controlling the pressure on the file or the amount of metal you remove, your teeth get to be different lengths. And that's when it's time to do a detailed sharpening, where you bring a set of calipers out, you got to get your teeth all back to the same length, and you'll also check your depth gauges as well and get everything right back where it needs to be. For me, I know it's usually every 3 to 4 sharpenings I need to do a more detailed sharpening. Today what I'm going to do is kind of a mix of all 3 because I think the chain I've got on this saw is brand new, so it might fight me a bit when I first start taking some strokes, but I'm going to basically just go around and check the whole chain, make sure all the teeth are sharp, make sure all the teeth are the same length, and then go ahead and check my depth gauges. When I'm sharpening the saw today, I'm going to use this tool here, which is called the chain Meister. And what this chain Meister is a way you can mount your chain on the bar without mounting it on the saw to file. So this is very handy if you want to touch up a chain in the garage, or if you have a rock chain. If you're a hand filer, you'll hand file if the chain's a little bit dull, but if you really ding a chain, you're going to want to switch it out. So this is a great way to mount the chain in the shop without it being on the saw to get back your edge. But for me, it's just going to work out very well because the chain's already off the saw. I don't need to put it back together yet, and it's just going to be easier to work with. The other thing you can do with this chain Meister is if you've got like a really long bar and you want to store the bar and the chain that goes with it in razor sharp conditions, you can sharpen the chain on this thing, leave it on it, and then just hang it right on the wall on this little T-handle, and you've got your bigger bar with a sharp chain on it and ready to go. So I will leave a link in the description of this video to a video I made about the chain Meister a couple of years ago, and I'll also put a link in the end of the video. I'll put a link up to a video about this chain Meister guy. All we're going to need to sharpen the saw today is a file and a file holder, and the chain we're sharpening today, I need a 13/64 file. I have an extra file because I'm assuming I'm going to be removing quite a bit of metal, so I've got an extra one ready just in case. We're going to need a flat file for filing our depth gauges. We're going to need a depth gauge tool for setting our depth gauge height. We're going to want a pair of calipers. It doesn't have to be digital calipers. I probably won't even turn these on, but this is how we're going to set our tooth length. And then I like to use an orange magic marker to mark the tooth I start on, because that way it's easy to know where you start and finish. You don't sharpen them twice. I have been known to daydream when I'm sharpening and go by the mark. And I used to use a black marker, but sometimes it blends in very well and you don't notice it. So I like a nice bright color. And then I'm also going to be using some safety glasses that have magnifiers built in. And I got this tip from, there's a channel called Tips from a Shipwright, where there's a fella that's got a few years on me, and he uses these to sharpen his chain, and I just think it's a great idea because anything that makes the job easier is a plus in my book. Let's see if we can get the chain on the chain Meister and get her sharpened. When you're putting your chain in the vise, you always got to be careful you don't bump something down below. I can't tell you how many times I go to move my chain that I'm filing and I end up bumping something down below there.